The morning sun painted the horizon crimson as Valerie Sutton clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders, her gaze fixed on the smoldering remains of her family's homestead. 3 days had passed since the fever claimed her parents and younger brother, yet the townsfolk had wasted no time setting fire to the place, convinced that dark forces had spared her alone. Arizona Territory, 1876, was no place for a woman without protection, especially one the town had branded a witch. "You best keep moving, Miss Sutton," Sheriff Gaines had warned her just yesterday, his eyes unable to meet hers. "Folks are scared. They don't understand how you walked away from that fever without so much as a cough when it took your whole family." Valerie knew better than to argue. 22 years on this earth had taught her that fear made people dangerous. She had packed what little remained and headed west, away from the whispers and accusations. 3 days of riding through the unforgiving terrain had left her exhausted, her chestnut mare nearly as spent as she was. The small creek before her sparkled in the morning light, offering temporary respite. As she dismounted, letting her horse drink, Valerie caught sight of her reflection in the still water. Dark circles underlined her deep green eyes, her normally vibrant auburn hair hung limp and tangled. She barely recognized herself. "You're trespassing, madam." The deep voice startled her. Valerie whirled around, nearly losing her balance on the rocky creek edge. A man sat atop a dapple gray stallion, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. His posture suggested confidence, but his hand remained casually at his side, not reaching for the revolver holstered at his hip. "I meant no harm," Valerie said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Just water for my horse and myself." The stranger studied her for a long moment before dismounting in one fluid motion. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by sun and wind. Despite the harshness of his features, his eyes, a startling blue, held no malice. "This is Tucker Zimmerman's ranch," he said, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair. "And I'm Tucker Zimmerman." "Valerie Sutton," she replied, fighting the urge to back away. "I'll be on my way once my horse has rested." Tucker's eyes narrowed slightly as he took in her disheveled appearance and the minimal belongings strapped to her saddle. "You're running from something." "It wasn't a question." "People fear what they don't understand," Valerie answered carefully. A hint of a smile touched Tucker's lips. "That's the God's honest truth." He gestured toward a distant cluster of buildings. "My ranch is just over that rise. You're welcome to a proper meal before continuing your journey." Valerie hesitated, years of caution warring with desperate hunger. "I don't accept charity." "Then earn your keep," Tucker replied simply. "Ranch cook broke his leg last week. Hands are complaining about my cooking something fierce." It was the matter-of-fact way he said it, no pity, just a straightforward exchange that finally made Valerie nod her agreement. "I can cook," she said. "For a day or two." Tucker replaced his hat. "Let's get moving then, daylight's wasting." The Zimmerman ranch was larger than Valerie had expected, a sprawling main house constructed of sturdy logs and stone, several outbuildings, a barn that could house at least 20 horses, and bunkhouses for the ranch hands. A small garden plot sat near the kitchen door, though it looked neglected. "My mother started that garden," Tucker explained, following her gaze. "Haven't had the heart to tend it properly since she passed." "How long?" Valerie asked, dismounting carefully. 3 years now. Father followed 6 months later." Tucker took the reins of both horses. "Kitchen's through there. Make yourself at home while I see to the horses." The kitchen was spacious but disorganized, with dirty dishes piled in a basin and food stores arranged with no discernible system. Valerie rolled up her sleeves and set to work, grateful for the distraction of physical labor. By the time Tucker returned, She had cleaned the worst of the mess and had a pot of beans simmering with salt pork. "You work fast," he observed, leaning against the doorframe. "I've always found idle hands to be dangerous," she replied, not looking up from the cornbread batter she was mixing. Tucker watched her for another moment. "Where are you headed?" "West," Valerie said simply. "That's a mighty big direction. Anything specific in mind?" Valerie set down her spoon, finally meeting his gaze. "Somewhere people don't know me." Tucker's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes softened. "Trouble follows most folks who come through these parts." "I didn't bring trouble," she said firmly. "It was thrust upon me." "Fair enough." Tucker pushed away from the doorframe. "I've got work to do. Dinner at sundown." Valerie nodded, returning to her task as he left. For the first time in days, she felt something close to calm. Word spread quickly among the ranch hands about the new cook. By sundown, 8 curious cowboys had assembled at the long table in the dining room, their conversation falling silent when Valerie emerged from the kitchen carrying a large pot. "This here's Miss Sutton," Tucker announced, rising from his seat at the head of the table. "She's cooking for us temporarily, and you'll all show her proper respect or answer to me." A chorus of "yes, boss," and nodded heads followed as Valerie served the meal. The men ate enthusiastically, several commenting that it was the best food they'd had since Mrs. Martinez, the previous cook's wife, had assisted in the kitchen. After the meal, as Valerie was cleaning up, a young ranch hand lingered behind. "Madam, I just wanted to thank you," he said, nervously twisting his hat in his hands. "My name's Ethan. I'm from back east originally, and your cornbread reminded me of my mother's." Valerie offered him a small smile. "You're welcome, Ethan." The young man hesitated, then blurted, "Some of the fellas were wondering how long you might be staying." "Just until my horse and I are rested," she answered carefully. Ethan looked disappointed but nodded respectfully before leaving her to her work. Later that evening, Valerie sat on the porch steps, gazing at the stars scattered across the vast Arizona sky. The night was cool, a welcome relief after the day's heat. "Mind if I join you?" Tucker asked, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. Valerie accepted one with a nod of thanks. "Your men seemed pleased with dinner." "They were," Tucker confirmed, settling beside her. "Haven't seen them clear plates that fast in months." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, sipping their coffee. "Where are you really from, Valerie Sutton?" Tucker finally asked, his voice gentle but direct. Valerie stared into her cup. "A small settlement near Prescott." "Not much more than a church, a general store, and people too interested in each other's business." "And they drove you out?" She took a deep breath. "My family died of fever, all of them. Mother, father, little brother. I nursed them through it, but somehow I never got sick." "The town decided that wasn't natural." Tucker's jaw tightened. "So they called you a witch." "They didn't say it to my face at first," Valerie continued, the words spilling out after days of silence. "But I heard the whispers, saw the way they crossed the street to avoid me. Then they burned our home while I was burying my family." Her voice cracked slightly. "The sheriff suggested I leave before things got worse." Tucker's voice was quiet but filled with controlled anger. "Superstitious fools. Fear makes people cruel," Valerie said softly. "I don't blame them." "Not really." "You're a better person than I am, then," Tucker replied. After a moment he added, "Stay as long as you need. No one will bother you here." Valerie looked at him, searching his face for any sign of pity or deceit, but found only sincerity. "Thank you," she said simply. The days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Valerie cooked for the ranch hands, gradually bringing order to the chaotic kitchen. She started tending the neglected garden, finding solace in coaxing life from the dry earth. Tucker would often join her in the evenings. sitting in companionable silence or sharing stories of his day. She learned that he had inherited the ranch at 25 when his parents died, that he had never married despite being 32, and that he was respected by his men for his fairness and hard work. He never pushed her to share more of her past than she offered, and never questioned her eventual plans to move on. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Valerie's mare had long since recovered, but each time she thought of leaving, something held her back. The way morning light streamed through the kitchen window, the satisfaction of serving food that brought smiles to tired faces, the quiet evenings with Tucker, which gradually extended from minutes to hours. On a particularly hot afternoon, as Valerie was hanging laundry to dry, she noticed a cloud of dust approaching from the east riders, at least 4 of them. She shielded her eyes against the sun, an uneasy feeling settling in her stomach. Tucker emerged from the barn, rifle in hand, several ranch hands falling in behind him as they watched the approaching riders. "Get inside, Valerie," he called, his voice tight. She hesitated only briefly before hurrying to the house, but remained by the window, watching as the riders approached. Their leader was a tall man with a silver star pinned to his vest, a lawman. Tucker stepped forward to meet them, his posture relaxed but alert. Valerie couldn't hear the conversation, but she saw Tucker's shoulders stiffen as he glanced toward the house. After several tense minutes, he nodded curtly and the riders turned to leave. When Tucker entered the house, his expression was grim. "That was Sheriff Ellis from Wickenburg," he said without preamble. "They're looking for a woman who fled Prescott after her family died under suspicious circumstances." Valerie felt the blood drain from her face. "What did you tell him?" "That I haven't seen anyone matching that description," Tucker replied, setting his rifle down. "But they're asking at every ranch and settlement in the area. It's only a matter of time before someone connects you to their description." "I should leave," Valerie said, already moving toward the stairs to gather her few belongings. Tucker caught her arm gently. "Running will only make you look guilty." "I am not guilty of anything except surviving," she snapped, then immediately regretted her tone. "I'm sorry, Tucker. You've been nothing but kind, and I've brought trouble to your doorstep." His hand remained on her arm, warm and steady. "You haven't brought anything but decent meals and conversation to my ranch, Valerie." Before she could respond, there was a commotion outside, shouts and the thunder of hooves. Tucker moved to the window, cursing under his breath. "They're back with more men," he said, reaching for his rifle again. "Stay here." But as he moved toward the door, it burst open. Sheriff Ellis stood there, flanked by 2 deputies, all with weapons drawn. "Tucker Zimmerman, step aside," the sheriff ordered. "We've had word from one of your hands that you're harboring a fugitive." Valerie felt cold fury replace her fear. "I am no fugitive," she said, stepping forward despite Tucker's warning glance. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Valerie Sutton. You're wanted for questioning regarding the deaths of your family." "My family died of fever," she said evenly. "I nursed them until the end." "And yet you didn't get sick," one of the deputies said, his voice laced with suspicion. "Strange, isn't it? Especially when the doctor said that fever was catching something fierce." Tucker moved to stand beside Valerie. "Sheriff, surely you don't believe in witchcraft in this day and age." Sheriff Ellis looked uncomfortable. "I believe in the law, Zimmerman. And I've got orders to bring her in for questioning." "On what charges?" Tucker demanded. "That's not for me to decide," the sheriff replied. "Now step aside or you'll be charged with obstructing justice." Valerie placed a gentle hand on Tucker's arm. "It's all right," she said softly. "I have nothing to hide." Tucker's eyes met hers, fierce with protective anger. "This isn't justice, Valerie." "I know," she replied, but running won't solve anything. The ride to Wickenburg was tense and silent. Valerie rode in the sheriff's wagon, Tucker following on horseback despite the sheriff's objections. When she glanced back at him, his expression was resolute, his eyes never leaving her. The town of Wickenburg was larger than her home settlement, with proper buildings lining a main street instead of scattered cabins. People stopped to stare as the sheriff's wagon passed, whispers following in its wake. They brought her to a small jail at the end of town, a sturdy stone building with iron bars on the windows. Inside, Sheriff Ellis directed her to a cell while Tucker argued vehemently with one of the deputies. "I want to speak with the judge," Tucker demanded. "This is nothing but superstition and fear-mongering. Judge Hollister won't be back until tomorrow," the sheriff said wearily. "Miss Sutton will be held until then." Valerie sat on the narrow cot in the cell, trying to maintain her composure. "Tucker," she called softly, "go back to your ranch." "There's nothing you can do tonight." He approached the cell, gripping the bars. "I'm not leaving you here." Sheriff Ellis cleared his throat. "You've got 5 minutes, Zimmerman, then I expect you to clear out until morning." When they were alone, Tucker's voice dropped to a whisper. "Listen to me, Valerie. This town may be bigger than yours, but it's still driven by the same fears. These kinds of accusations, they can turn ugly fast." "I know," she replied, remembering all too well the faces of her neighbors as they watched her home burn. "But I can't run forever." Tucker's eyes held hers. "I've sent one of my hands to fetch Daniel Harper in Phoenix. He's a proper lawyer who deals in facts, not superstition. He'll be here by tomorrow afternoon." Valerie felt a surge of gratitude. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," Tucker said firmly, "I did." Their time ran out too quickly. As Tucker was leaving, he turned back to her, his expression grave. "Whatever happens, remember you're not alone anymore." The night passed slowly. Valerie slept fitfully on the hard cot, waking to every sound from the street outside. By dawn, she could hear voices gathering, the murmur of a crowd forming. Sheriff Ellis brought her a tray with coffee and bread. "There's people from Prescott arrived this morning," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Word spreads fast. Are they here for justice or a spectacle?" Valerie asked bitterly. The sheriff didn't answer, which was answer enough. By midday, the crowd outside had grown restless. Valerie could hear their voices rising, demanding action. Sheriff Ellis and his deputies looked increasingly nervous. "The judge sent word he won't arrive until tomorrow," the sheriff told her through the bars. "I don't like the look of that crowd." Fear crawled up Valerie's spine. "What are you saying?" Before he could answer, the front door of the jail burst open. Tucker strode in, followed by a distinguished-looking man in a tailored suit. "Sheriff Ellis," the stranger said, his voice cultured but authoritative. "I'm Daniel Harper, attorney at law. I understand you're holding my client without formal charges." The sheriff straightened. "She's being held for questioning regarding suspicious deaths, Mr. Harper." "Suspicion isn't a charge," Harper replied coolly, setting his briefcase on the desk. "Unless you can produce a warrant signed by a judge, Miss Sutton is to be released immediately." "Now wait just a minute," Harper cut him off. "I've already sent telegrams to the territorial governor and federal marshal's office regarding this matter. Would you like to explain to them why you're imprisoning an innocent woman based on rumors of witchcraft?" The sheriff's face flushed. "It's not that simple, Harper. There's a crowd out there demanding justice for the Sutton family." "A lynch mob isn't justice," Tucker interjected, his voice hard. A crash from outside punctuated his words. Something had been thrown against the jail's window. The shouting grew louder. "You see my predicament," Sheriff Ellis said grimly. "I release her and I can't guarantee her safety. That crowd wants blood." Harper began to argue further, but Valerie interrupted. "If I may," she said, her voice steady despite her fear, "I have a suggestion." All three men turned to her. "I'll face them," she continued. "Let me speak to them directly." "Absolutely not," Tucker said immediately. "It's too dangerous." Valerie met his concerned gaze. "What choice do we have? Hiding behind these walls only makes me look guilty." Harper considered her thoughtfully. "She has a point. A public declaration of innocence, with myself present as legal counsel, might diffuse the situation." Sheriff Ellis looked skeptical but relieved at the potential solution. "I'll have my deputies maintain order. And my ranch hands are outside as well," Tucker added grimly. "They'll help keep things civil." Despite Tucker's obvious reluctance, the plan was set in motion. Sheriff Ellis unlocked Valerie's cell and led the group toward the front door of the jail. The noise of the crowd swelled as they stepped onto the wooden porch. At least 50 people had gathered in the street, their faces set in various expressions of anger, fear, and morbid curiosity. Valerie recognized several from her home settlement, including Pastor Williams, who had presided over her family's funeral. "Good people," Sheriff Ellis called, raising his hands for quiet. "Miss Sutton has agreed to address your concerns directly." A murmur ran through the crowd. Tucker positioned himself slightly in front of Valerie, his hand near his holstered revolver. Valerie stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice clear. "I know many of you believe I had something to do with my family's deaths, that I somehow survived by unnatural means." She paused, looking directly at those she recognized. "My parents and brother died of fever. I nursed them day and night. Perhaps I didn't fall ill because God had mercy. Perhaps it was because I'd had a similar fever as a child. I don't know why I was spared, but it wasn't through witchcraft or evil." "Then why did you run?" a voice called from the crowd. "Because my home was burned while I was burying my family," Valerie replied, an edge entering her voice. "Because I was told I wasn't welcome in the place I'd lived my entire life." Pastor Williams stepped forward, his expression troubled. "The burning was wrong," he admitted. "But you must understand, child, your survival when all others perished caused fear. And fear causes people to see evil where there is only tragedy," Valerie responded. "I loved my family. I would have given my life for theirs if I could." A tense silence fell over the crowd. Daniel Harper moved to stand beside Valerie. "I have examined the facts of this case," he announced formally, "and found no evidence of wrongdoing. Unless someone here can produce actual proof, not supposition or rumor of Miss Sutton's guilt, this matter should be considered closed." More murmuring from the crowd, but some of the aggression seemed to be dissipating. Then a man pushed his way to the front. It was Dr. Mercer, who had attended her family in their final days. "I have something to say," he declared, looking up at Valerie. "I was the physician who treated the Sutton family. When they first fell ill, I advised Valerie to maintain distance, to wear a cloth over her face when tending them. She followed these precautions diligently." He turned to face the crowd. "It is entirely possible, even likely, that these measures prevented her infection. There is nothing supernatural about it." Relief washed over Valerie at this unexpected support. She caught Tucker's eye, seeing his tension ease slightly, but not everyone was convinced. A grizzled man near the front spat on the ground. "If she ain't a witch, let's see her prove it." "And how exactly would she do that?" Tucker demanded, his hand still hovering near his gun. "Trial by water," someone else called. "Everyone knows a witch won't sink." Daniel Harper stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "This is preposterous. We are not in medieval Europe. This is the United States of America in 1876. The crowd grew louder, divided between those demanding a test and those beginning to disperse, satisfied by Dr. Mercer's explanation and Valerie's words. Sheriff Ellis moved to the edge of the porch, his hand raised for silence. That's enough. There will be no trials by water or any other nonsense in my town. This meeting is over. Go back to your homes or businesses. Some began to leave, but a core group remained, led by the grizzled man who had first suggested the test. If she ain't guilty, why is she afraid to prove it? He shouted. Tucker had finally had enough. He strode to the edge of the porch, his presence commanding immediate attention. Listen well, he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet street. Valerie Sutton is under my protection now. You want to harm her, you'll have to go through me first. His hand rested openly on his revolver now. And I promise you, I'm a damn good shot. The crowd shifted uneasily. Tucker Zimmerman's reputation as a fair but formidable man was well known in the territory. They called her a witch for surviving, Tucker continued, his voice filled with controlled fury. Well, if that's all it takes, then I guess I'm guilty too. My whole family died of consumption 3 years back, and here I stand. He looked directly at the grizzled man. You want to throw me in the river too? The man backed away, muttering under his breath. Tucker turned to face the remaining crowd, his voice rising. If you're so determined to burn a witch, then understand this: if she burns, I burn beside her. A hush fell over the street. Even those who had been most vocal seemed taken aback by the intensity of Tucker's declaration. Pastor Williams broke the silence, stepping forward with hands raised in a placating gesture. Perhaps we've been too hasty in our judgment, he said. Dr. Mercer's explanation is sound, and Mr. Zimmerman speaks truly. Survival alone is not evidence of wrongdoing. Slowly, the tension began to dissipate. People drifted away in 2s and 3s until only a small group remained, watching sullenly from across the street. Sheriff Ellis sighed heavily. I suggest you all leave town for now. Those fellows don't look entirely convinced. My ranch is 30 miles from here, Tucker said. We'll leave immediately. Daniel Harper nodded. I'll accompany you part of the way. I have some additional legal matters to discuss. As they prepared to depart, Valerie touched Tucker's arm. What you said out there. His blue eyes met hers, unwavering. I meant every word. The journey back to Tucker's ranch was tense but uneventful. Daniel Harper rode with them for 10 miles, discussing the legal aftermath of the day's events. I've already drafted papers for Judge Hollister, formally dismissing any allegations against you, Miss Sutton, he explained. And I'll be filing complaints regarding the burning of your property. You may be entitled to compensation. Valerie nodded, though money was the furthest thing from her mind. Thank you for your help today. Harper smiled briefly. Mr. Zimmerman is very persuasive when he wants to be, and I've always despised superstition masquerading as justice. At a crossroads, he tipped his hat. I'll be in touch in a few days. Try to rest in the meantime. As Harper rode toward Phoenix, Tucker and Valerie continued toward the ranch in comfortable silence. The sun was setting by the time they reached the familiar buildings, bathing everything in golden light. Ethan and several other ranch hands rode out to meet them, clearly relieved to see them return safely. Everything all right at the ranch? Tucker asked as they dismounted. All quiet, boss, Ethan confirmed. Got a telegram from Phoenix, though. Thought it might be important. He handed Tucker a folded paper. Tucker read it quickly, his eyebrows rising in surprise. He passed it to Valerie without comment. The telegram was from Dr. Mercer. Examined medical journals stop cases documented of natural immunity to certain fevers. Stop willing to testify formally. If needed, stop. Regret not speaking sooner. Stop. Valerie folded the paper carefully, a weight lifting from her shoulders. Science, not witchcraft, she said softly. Tucker nodded. Some people just need time to choose reason over fear. That evening, after a quiet meal with the ranch hands, Valerie found herself once again on the porch steps, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Tucker joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee as had become their custom. "You should know," he said after they had sat in silence for a while, "that what I said in town wasn't just for show." Valerie turned to look at him, the fading light softening his weathered features. "I know," she replied simply. Tucker set his coffee aside. "I've grown accustomed to having you here, Valerie, more than accustomed." He met her gaze directly. "I don't want you to leave." Her heart quickened at the sincerity in his voice. "Are you asking me to stay as your cook?" A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "No, though your cooking is a fine benefit." His hand found hers in the gathering darkness. "I'm asking you to stay because this place hasn't felt like home since my parents died. Not until you arrived." Valerie's breath caught in her throat. "Tucker, you don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "After everything that's happened, you deserve time to think, but I wanted you to know where I stand." Valerie looked out at the ranch, the buildings solid against the landscape, the corrals where horses moved quietly in the evening air, the garden she had brought back to life. Then she looked at Tucker, his face open and honest, waiting for her response. "I don't need time," she said softly. "When I first came here, I was just looking for a place to hide, but now—" She squeezed his hand. "Now I've found somewhere I might belong." Tucker's smile was slow but radiant. "Is that a yes?" "It's a beginning," Valerie answered, returning his smile. In the weeks that followed, Valerie's place on the ranch evolved naturally from guest to partner. She took charge of the household management, expanded the garden, and continued to cook meals that brought the ranch hands running at the dinner bell. Tucker consulted her on business decisions, valuing her practical mind and careful judgment. Their courtship progressed with the same straightforward honesty that had marked their first meeting. Tucker was not a man for flowery words or grand gestures, but his actions spoke volumes. He carved time from busy days to help in the garden, brought wildflowers from his rides across the range, and each evening they shared coffee and conversation on the porch steps. Word spread throughout the territory about Tucker Zimmerman's stand against the witch hunters of Wickenburg. Some ranchers stopped doing business with him, but others, including several prominent cattle buyers, made a point of seeking him out, impressed by his integrity. One evening in late summer, as they sat watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Tucker took Valerie's hand. "I've been thinking," he said, a hint of nervousness in his usually confident voice. "A dangerous pastime," Valerie teased gently. Tucker laughed. "Maybe so." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. "This was my mother's," he said, opening his palm to reveal a gold ring with a small, perfect diamond. "My father gave it to her when they started this ranch together. Nothing fancy but solid, like them." Valerie's heart began to race as Tucker slid from the porch step to one knee before her. "Valerie Sutton, I'm not a man who believes in fate or magic, but I do believe that sometimes people find each other at exactly the right moment." He held the ring between them. "I love you. Will you marry me and build a life here together?" Tears blurred Valerie's vision as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Tucker Zimmerman, I will." The ring slipped onto her finger as if it had been made for her. Tucker rose to sit beside her again, drawing her close for a tender kiss that held both promise and passion. "They called me a witch for surviving," Valerie murmured against his lips. "And you said you'd burn beside me." Tucker brushed a strand of hair from her face. "And I meant it. Whatever comes, we face it together." Their wedding was held in October, when the worst of the summer heat had passed and the desert bloomed with unexpected vigor. Daniel Harper brought Judge Hollister to perform the ceremony, and to Valerie's surprise, Dr. Mercer attended, along with a few former neighbors who had come to regret their hasty judgment. Ethan and the other ranch hands decorated the main house with streamers and lanterns, and the cook they had hired to replace Valerie prepared a feast for all to enjoy. As Tucker and Valerie exchanged their vows beneath an arch of desert flowers, even the most hardened cowboys wiped suspiciously at their eyes. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Judge Hollister declared, beaming at the couple. "Mr. Zimmerman, you may kiss your bride." Tucker swept Valerie into his arms, his kiss a declaration before all present that this woman was his chosen partner, his equal, his love. The celebration continued well into the night, with music and dancing under the stars. As the hour grew late, Tucker and Valerie slipped away from the festivities, walking hand in hand toward the main house, their home. "Happy, Mrs. Zimmerman?" Tucker asked, his arm around her waist. Valerie leaned into his embrace. "More than I ever thought possible." The first year of their marriage brought both challenges and joys. A drought threatened their cattle until Tucker's gamble on digging a deeper well paid off. Valerie's first Christmas feast for the ranch hands became a legend in the territory. And in the spring, when Valerie confirmed what she had suspected for weeks, they shared the news of her pregnancy with unrestrained happiness. Their daughter, Elizabeth, was born on a clear winter night, with Dr. Mercer riding 40 miles through a snowstorm to attend the birth. She had Tucker's blue eyes and Valerie's auburn hair, and from her first cry she had both parents wrapped around her tiny fingers. As Elizabeth grew, so did the Zimmerman ranch. Tucker's fair business practices and Valerie's careful management allowed them to purchase adjacent properties when they became available. They built a school for the children of their ranch hands and neighboring homesteaders, with Valerie often serving as teacher during the winter months. 5 years after Elizabeth's birth, their son James joined the family, followed 2 years later by twins Michael and Sarah. The main house expanded to accommodate the growing family, but the porch steps remained, a sacred spot where Tucker and Valerie still shared coffee and conversation after the children were asleep. On the 10th anniversary of their marriage, Tucker surprised Valerie with a journey to San Francisco, a proper honeymoon they had never taken. For 2 glorious weeks, they explored the bustling city, attended the theater, and walked along the magnificent bay. In their elegant hotel room, far from the responsibilities of ranch and family, they rediscovered each other as lovers and friends. On their last night in the city, they stood on their hotel balcony, watching ships move through the harbor below. "Any regrets?" Tucker asked, his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. Valerie turned in his embrace, studying the face she had come to know as well as her own, the lines at the corners of his eyes deeper now, strands of gray at his temples, but those blue eyes still clear and direct. "Not one," she said truthfully. "Everything that happened, even the painful parts, led me to you, to our children, to the life we've built." Tucker smiled, the special smile he reserved only for her. "You know, they still tell that story in Wickenburg. About the witch who couldn't be drowned and the cowboy who said he'd burn beside her. People do love their dramatic tales," Valerie said, returning his smile. "Though I prefer our version." "And how does our version end?" Tucker asked, drawing her closer. Valerie reached up to touch his face, her heart as full as it had been on their wedding day. "It doesn't," she whispered. "It just keeps getting better." They returned to their ranch, to their children and the life they had built together, carrying the memory of those peaceful days as a treasure to sustain them through the inevitable hardships that life would bring. The legend of the witch and the cowboy faded into territory folklore, but the truth of their love story of finding strength in each other, of standing together against fear and prejudice, became the foundation upon which the Zimmerman legacy was built. Years passed. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Tucker and Valerie aged together with grace and gratitude. Each evening, regardless of weather or weariness, they would sit together on the porch steps, watching the sun set over the land they loved, their hands intertwined, coffee cups forgotten as they spoke of the day's events, or simply enjoyed the comfortable silence of two people who had faced the world side by side and emerged stronger for it. And if visitors to the Zimmerman ranch noticed that wildflowers seemed to bloom more vibrantly in Valerie's garden than anywhere else in the territory, or that rainfall somehow always managed to find their land even in the driest seasons, they were wise enough to attribute it to good fortune rather than anything more mysterious. After all, as Tucker Zimmerman was fond of saying with a wink to his beloved wife, some things in this world don't need explaining, they just need believing.